Well, I don't know about you guys, but I've been wondering about how accurate this tachometer is that I got for 10 bucks. And since I went to that other sale, I got some more accurate tachometers. I figured maybe I'd try and use this one here. This one is the Asahi tachometer, hand tachometer. This is from the Nagashima Keiki Company Limited of Japan. And this seems like it's a more precise instrument for measuring RPMs. It's got some sort of clockwork mechanism in it when I actually click this. So I just read the instructions. I put this rubber tip on here, and basically what I do is this is to zero the tachometer, and once I have it in there spinning, I press this button, and within 3 seconds it will give me the correct reading. And this has a much more graduated dial, so I think this is going to be much more accurate. And this large hand going around one full revolution is 1,000 RPM. So I can definitely get more precise than this tachometer right here. This tachometer right here is definitely built for something going much faster, because where the number 5 is on this tachometer is 500 RPM and the 10 is 1,000. So you can see this one goes to a much higher speed than what my lathe is doing. So let's give this a shot. I've still got it set for the highest speed, which I had determined the other day was probably around 600 RPM with the other tachometer. So let's see what happens with this one here. This what else is nice, I already actually did this, but this actually holds the reading after I take it away. So you see, I take the tachometer off, and it still holds the reading, and I can see clearly that this is 625 RPM is what it's running at right now. And like I said before, that's too fast for a lathe this size. And then I can just press this button and it'll zero it, and I'm ready to go again. Now you might think that this is limited to just 1,000 RPMs, but it's not. This hand can keep going around and around, and there's a small second hand sub-dial down here so that you can do multiples of thousands. So it looks like this thing is capable to go up to, well, theoretically it's capable to go up to 10,000 RPM, but I can't imagine holding this thing on a spindle moving that fast. So now this is going to be the setting that I had, 450 RPM. You know, it occurs to me, it's not so much that this tachometer wasn't necessarily accurate, it's just that it was much harder to read the subtleties of between, say, 400 and 500 RPM because of the graduations on this dial. So anyways, I figured about 450. Let's see what it is more precisely. That looks like almost 425 on the button. Alright, this speed came in at about 350. 325. And this last one is about let's see here, 215. Alright, now I'm going to try that lowest speed in back gear. That's 25 RPMs almost on the dot. 25 RPMs, that's pretty slow. Hey everybody, it's been a few days since I've, well actually over a week since I've really done anything on the Vernon Lathe. I did clean up the lantern style tool post, and this is actually the exact setup that was on here when I bought the lathe, with the very same carbide raised tip cutter, and I think it's an Armstrong tool holder. It was pretty dirty, but I cleaned it up, and I'm going to have to use that until I make a T-nut for this slot so that I can use the Aloris. And I also don't really have any holders for that Aloris anyways. I think I've only got a couple. But anyways, tonight what I want to do is I want to solve a little bit of a mystery. I mean, it shouldn't be too much of a mystery, but what I want to do is I want to know what the taper is of the spindle here and the taper of the tailstock. Now, I'm hoping that they're standard standard Morse tapers, but I want to confirm that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an indicator and get this out of the way. We don't need this on there for this operation. Alright, so here's the setup I decided to use. I'm hoping this is a good way to do this. What I got is I got my indicator stand on the cross slide, and I've got my best test indicator on there, and I've got it has different stylus tips that you can put on there, and I've got a stylus tip that's got a little ball. It's got a curve with a ball on the end, kind of like that shape right there that my finger's in. And what I've got is I've got that resting on the bottom center. Now I'm eyeballing that, but I could actually tell the center because as I move out, that should change, and it does. So if I move back a little, it might be a little bit of a, there's a little bit of roughness on that mouth right there, so I might have to move this in a little bit. But you'll watch as I move the carriage that way, moving the indicator in, you'll see it's changing, and that's because there's a taper. This hole is tapered, so it's getting smaller like this. I'm kind of exaggerating as I move in, so that's pushing up on that indicator stylus. So now with it in past the rough spot, I should be able to move this in and out, and you can see that when I go past it, it starts going back up. So if I put it right where that low reading is, that should be the actual very bottom of the curve. So now, back this back out a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure how far this goes up when I move that indicator in exactly 1 inch. I want to see how much that changes, and that will give me the taper per inch. So what I've done down here is I've mounted my Mighty Mag mount with another indicator, and I've zeroed that, and that's touching the side of the carriage, so that when I move this carriage in, I'll be able to know when I've moved it exactly 1 inch. Bring this back to 0, and let's see if I can't get the best test to 0, just to make my math easier. Alright, that should be close enough. Alright, so you really can't see that indicator there, because in order for the stylus to be at the proper angle, I have to have the face of that indicator pretty much facing all the way up. So now it's just a matter of winding this carriage to the left until it moves 1 inch. Okay, which I could also put a scale there actually. You know the old saying, a place for everything and everything in its place? I really need to get better at that, because I just looked all over the place and can't figure out what I do with the scale that I like using. So I got this little dinky Fairgate cheesy little scale, but it'll do the job. I'm mainly going to rely on this. I just want to be able to not have to sit here and count off. So, although you know I'm going to do it anyways. So, alright, so we're at 0 there, and so that's 50 thousandths. So that's 1/10 of an inch, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10. 5/10, which should be a 1/2 inch, and the scale is did I just hit that? Oh, you rotten stick. I think I just hit that with my finger. Yeah, I must have, because it's not back at 0 anymore. I'm gonna watch where I'm flicking my hand here. Let's try that again. Okay, I wasn't watching what was happening up here with the indicator and just found out that the indicator well, yeah, of course I can't go in a full inch. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to go in a 1/2 inch and double the reading. Okay, I've reset, so I'm going to go in. I'm going to go in a 1/2 inch. That should be 1/2 inch right there. My scale looks like it's showing me 1/2 inch, and well, I could barely do that. What I really need is something with a much longer finger that could stick in there.
That's what she said.
Anyways, so I don't think the indicator body is hitting. I guess if I push down on this I could tell, huh? But before I do that, I'm going to read what I've got here. I've got 5, 10, looks like 12.5 thousandths. Yep, okay, it's not touching, so 10, 11, 12, 13, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I stand corrected. That is, you know what that is? That is time for me to have my reading glasses on. 10, this is the 1/2 thousandths indicator, so 11, 12, yeah, that's 13 thousandths. Alright, 13 thousandths, and then I'm going to back this up exactly 1/2 inch, and it should go back to 0. Half a thousandth by the looks of it. But for the most part, it worked out. So if I move this in 1/2 inch, the hole decreases by 13 thousandths, but that would be actually a radial measurement. So it's actually 26 thousandths diameter over 1/2 inch. So that should be 52 thousandths over an inch. Is that right? Alright, I'll have to figure the math out on that one and compare it to a chart of Morse tapers. Good morning, everybody. It's actually Monday morning of Columbus Day weekend 2015. Just got back from a camping trip, so I haven't worked on the Vernon in a few days, and I never did finish calculating what the taper was on that spindle, so I figured I'd go about explaining how I plan on doing that. So the last time I worked on the lathe, what I did was I ran an indicator inside the spindle, and had another indicator on the carriage, basically showing how far the travel was. And by traveling in a 1/2 inch, I determined that the indicator, if we're looking at the end of the spindle here, okay, and this is the center, that the indicator was moving in 13 thousandths over 1/2 inch. Well, the distance from here to here is the radius, and the diameter, which is the distance from here to here, is twice the radius. So the first thing I could do is I could double the 13 thousandths that I had, so that I know that this diameter is actually shrinking 26 thousandths over 1/2 inch. And then the next thing I do is, because I want to know how much it's changing over 1 inch, because most tapers are given by taper per foot or taper per inch, I want to know how much that is, so I could take that 26 and double it again and get 52. So what I end up with is I end up with 0.052 per inch. Alright, so now I can go look at some taper charts, and hopefully we'll find one that hits that magic number. So this is a website that I found. Simply Google Morse tapers and scroll down through the search results, and you'll find this nice little site right here called littlemachineshop.com. And littlemachineshop.com has a page that has a reference tables for all the major tapers. So you've got your Morse tapers, you've got your Jacobs tapers, you've got your Brown and Sharp tapers, and you've got your Jarno tapers, those are your major machine tapers used in the past, I don't know, 100 years or whatever. But what we're aiming for, or what we're hoping for, is that this is a standard Morse taper in this spindle. So over here on the left here, it shows your taper sizes. Alright, hopefully that's going to focus on that, but what we've got is in the far left column, we've got the taper sizes, and then we've got the, they're calling it the large end and the small end, so that would be over the length of the taper. So the standard Morse taper, for instance, number 0 is 2 inches in length overall. So that means if you measured it at the small end, you should get a diameter of 0.3561. I mean at the large end, 0.3561. At the small end, 0.252. So a little over. So a Morse number 0 is a really little sucker there. It starts out at about 1/4 of an inch. And then number 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4.5, the 5, the 6, and the 7. Now there may be some other Morse tapers that are not as standard that might not be on this chart, but for our purposes here today, what we're looking for is the taper per inch, which if we come all the way over to this column here, you'll notice the taper per inch. It also gives the angle from center, which is interesting. But the angle, in order for us to know what the angle from center is of what we did over there, I've got to make a nice little right triangle diagram and do some trigonometry that I haven't done since I was in college, and that was quite a many moons ago. And I bet you I could still figure it out, but we're not going to do that. Alright, so taper per inch. And what did I say? I doubled the 13 to get 26, and I doubled the 26 to get 52. And this is looking good because I see right off the bat the 0 taper is exactly, well, it's 0.0521, so it's just a tenth of a thousandth over. And then as they change, we got, okay, this 0.519, this 0.52 right there. Okay, so that's a 4.5. So it looks like we've got the right taper for a Morse taper. So now the next thing I got to do is I got to figure out which one of these it is based on the size of the bore. All right, so I come back over here to the lathe, and we're gonna back this out of the way. Alright, so what I want to know is I want to know the size here at the opening. This is going to be the large end. The small end is going to be somewhere in there, but I don't know where because I don't know yet what taper this is, so I don't know how far this taper goes in. And for all I know, this taper might even continue past the limit of where the actual taper would normally be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of these little snap gauges, and I'm going to, well, I'll tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to use that one because it's too big. Well, I went over and grabbed another one. It's too small, but I think I've got a size between the two. I've got a full set of these, but for the purposes of today, I will just end up using this one. I thought this was too big, but it does actually squeeze down small enough. So I'm going to insert it into the bore, try and keep it as straight as possible. Now I'm going to mic that. Actually, I'm just going to use my calipers. Alright, so I changed my mind again and decided to go with the micrometer. So I got a 1 to 2 inch micrometer here, and I already did this so that it didn't take too long to do, but I ended up getting 1.328. So all that tells me is that the very opening of this is 1.328, or roughly that. Those of you more astute observers will have realized that that's not an exact true reading of that bore, because it doesn't take into account the fact that there's a curvature to that wall, those side walls that I'm measuring between, and this is pretty much a flat pin that I'm putting up against it, so there's a little bit of an error in there. Okay, but this is going to get me into the ballpark. And the other thing is, well, does the taper start right here at the very beginning, or does it start in a little further? Or does it actually start in an imaginary world out here? In other words, when I insert the proper size taper into this hole, is it by design supposed to stick out a little bit, be a little bit proud? So anyways, let's go look at that chart again. So we're looking for large N 1.328. Well, we can eliminate all of these. 1.23. All right. So if we took according to this, if we took a number 4 and we stuck that in there, a number 4 would actually go in there too far. And a 4.5 is an 1.5 inches. So a 4.5 is going to stick out proud of that. And a number 5 is just plain way too big. The question is, do I have a number 4.5 taper here? Or do I have something completely different? I guess we should scroll down and see if we've got something else going on here. Well, we know it's not a Jacob's taper. Those are very short tapers that are used for fitting Jacob's chucks to arbors. So let's see, what do we get for brown and sharp tapers? Taper per inch on a brown and sharp is only 41 thousandths, so that doesn't seem to compute with the taper we calculated. And the large ends, well, there's a 1.2597, that's closer, and it goes up to 1.49, which is close to the 1.5 inches that we just saw, so it's not that. And then the last major standard is the Jarno, which I could probably Google the history of Jarno and probably find out that this probably wasn't even a taper that existed back then. I don't know how long it's been around, quite frankly. I'm sure somebody's going to give me the answer. Let's see. 1/2 inch. All Jarno tapers are exactly a 1/2 inch. 50 thousandths per inch. So large end on those at 1.375 and 1.25. Yeah, I still think we're dealing with a Morse taper here, but I'm worried that it's a Morse 4.5, which is not cool because I don't think I have any. So the next question is, some might ask, why do I care what the taper is of the spindle? Well, because if I want to put a dead center in here for turning between centers, that's the number one reason I want to know what it is. So right now I'm going to see what I've got for dead centers. Well, in an effort to try and be a little more organized here in the shop, I started using those metal cabinets with the multi-draws in them to start sorting things out. And what I did was, because I wasn't sure which ones fit what, I just took every live and dead center that I could find in the shop and stuck it in the same drawer. So I just went through all of those, and there weren't too many in there that were really big. I've got this horrible, I remember where I got this. This is a live center that needs work. And it's got a big Morse taper on it. And it's actually, I'm not even sure how this was put together, but it doesn't go all the way in, sticks out way far. So I'm thinking this is too big. And this came from an estate sale. It had nothing to do with the lathe. This little honey right here doesn't even go in at all. This might have been something that just was in a box with other stuff, or this might be for the South Bend. Well, let's see, just for the heck of it. I've got the South Bend spindle just sitting here. that's exactly what that is. That's a dead center somebody made up for the South Bend's spindle. So that's actually, not sure what size Morse taper that is, and then they've got it in a sleeve here. So that fits that. So unless I take that sleeve off, which looks like I'd have to grind this off maybe and punch this out, then I'm probably not going to be able to use that dead center for anything. Okay, so I did some checking, and this Wizard holder that I picked up somewhere and cleaned up, it says Wizard size size B-4, and the -4 I believe denotes that it's Morse taper number 4, and it's a B series holder, quick holder. So anyways, this I just verified it does have the measurements of a number 4 Morse taper, and you can see when I put it in, it's too small. The problem is I don't have a 4.5. I have this thing. I have no idea what taper this is, because I just checked and it doesn't match anything on the chart for a 4.5 or a 5. So it's kind of weird. So this came out of an estate where there was another old lathe there. I don't even remember who made that lathe. But this may have been something that the owner of that old lathe had made for that, and maybe that had some other kind of non-standard taper. So I've got to go with my gut feeling of that this is a 4.5 taper. And what's a bummer about that is, because if it was a 4 or a 5, I could go grab one of my Morse taper drill bits and slap it in there and see how the fit was. And for example, here's an adapter sleeve I have, 3-5. So that means that hole in there is a number 3 and this outside's a number 5. You can see it doesn't go in. 4 is too small, 5 is too big. If it is Morse taper, which I suspect it is, then I must have a 4.5 Morse taper spindle. As far as the tailstock size goes, that is going to be pretty easy, because when I bought the lathe, this nice live center was in there. This is a Morse taper 3, MT3, Morse taper 3. Seems like it's a perfect fit, but it is fairly new. So the question is this really fitting well, or did somebody take a guess? So that seems simple enough. What did I say? This was a 4? Yeah, so this won't go in. That makes sense. I think I read somewhere that a good way to test the fit of a taper is to put some chalk on the outside of the taper, insert the taper in the bore, and then spin it and then pull it out and see how the chalk is disturbed. But unfortunately I don't have, I just looked. I know I have some pieces of chalk that I found in toolboxes around here. Chalk is a machinist's friend. The nearest thing I've got is I've got this chalk dust for a chalk line. And it's probably not going to show up on the camera, but I can see it pretty clearly all over my hands. So I'm going to insert this, spin it, and pull it out. There might be a burr on the inside of that bore. Yeah, unfortunately it feels like there is something in there. Probably. It feels like a little ridge that goes radially around the inside, so probably what ended up happening was that at some point a drill bit or something, well, in the long life of this lathe, probably at more than one point, something has spun in there, and it may have spun in there with a chip. Caused a little bit of a gouge. So it does look like it is moving the chalk around, so it is what it is. I guess at some point it would benefit to redress this maybe, which I believe that would be done with a Morse taper reamer. So I would have to have an exact Morse taper number 3 reamer And then when I ream this, that would cause this to be actually a deeper of a hole, so it would cause this taper to go in a little bit further even. Oh, now you did it. What the heck? That's not good. How come when I back the quill all the way in, it doesn't pop the taper out? Uh-oh. Alright, so did I put this tailstock back together incorrectly when I put it back together, or is there a piece missing? No, there's definitely a bottom there that it can hit, so something's not copacetic here. It's that far in. Is that taper sleeve too short? According to this, if this taper sleeve went in further, then when I did this, it would pop out. I mean, I could tap this to see how far it goes in, but then I already saw that it didn't. When it goes in far enough to lock in there, it doesn't. Don't like that idea. Alright, let's start doing something more sensible, like using a drill bit, so I've got something to hold on to in case it gets stuck. Alright, so... yeah, it still doesn't... it still don't work. This is a Morse taper number 3. I'm confused. Anyways, so I guess I could take the quill apart again and investigate, try and figure out what's going on here. I guess an easy fix would be to just take the maybe put a little short piece of bar stock down inside the hole, so that when this is backed all the way out, that bar stock would push on the end of my taper and pop it out. But I'm wondering whether or not there was supposed to be a piece inside the quill here that maybe even locked the tang and is missing. I don't know. You know, I'm going to look at some of the old parts breakdowns of some of the old lathes on the Vintage Machinery website, like the South Bends and that, and just see for the heck of it what's down inside the bores on those.